I'm Dr. Pedja Stojicic. Welcome to Healthy Climate America. I'm a physician and a longtime organizer. Today, I guest hosting the final episode in our series on climate and health organizing. It's great to be here. From global walkouts and strikes to protests and boycotts, youth activists are not only making their voices heard, they're leading the way to a more just future. At the same time, health professionals are bringing their expertise and trusted voices to the fight. So, how do we bring these groups together to amplify their impact and tackle the complex challenges of climate change more effectively than ever before? I'm delighted to be joined today by Dominika Lasota, a Polish climate justice activist, a member of global youth movement Fridays for Future, and a co-founder of Sunrise Initiative. In our conversation, Dominika shares her journey into activism and reflects on how youth organizers and health professionals can learn from one another, build stronger relationships, and take action together across generations and issues. Hi, Domi. It's good to see you. Welcome. So, I'm super curious for you because it came at an early age. How did you become an activist?
So I often tell other people and to my friends that I thought that I'm not the right person to do any of this work because I was a nerd. I was a very shy kid. So definitely not someone you'd think is able to go on the streets and shout and demand stuff and like fight for anything. But then since I was a nerd, I was reading a lot and especially about like geography and politics. And then I stumbled upon this topic of the climate crisis, and I was like, interesting. So I lived up until that point. I lived in like a fairly safe bubble of, a middle class suburban household with my parents and my brother in the north of Poland, not really feeling that the world is going to end. It was boring, but it was normal and calm. And suddenly you're like hit with this information that actually this system we're living in is not leading us into a good direction. So I found out that, but still too shy to do anything about it. Fortunately, as I was, stepping into my adulthood and I was in high school, the Fridays for Future mobilization, the wave of the climate strikes kicked off. So that was the start for me, really.
Yeah.
And my first protest was super small. Like we were just like 5 people on the square in my hometown. But for some reason, I felt like that's the most revolutionary thing happening in the world. This action, this being involved was incredible for me. And I just kept doing it ever since.
I love that story because you're teaching us two important lessons. When you feel that anxiety and kind of like, it's never worry alone. That's the first rule of activism. And the other thing, the antidote to that kind of like overwhelming amount of information is not sitting with or getting more information. It's actually taking action on it, which is beautiful. I love that story, Naomi. So I'm curious about when you look at the youth climate movement overall, what was effective? Like what, in retrospect, when you look at it, what was the most effective things that helped you build power and actually create some change?
Well, I think the most fundamental and at the same time the most revolutionary thing within the climate movement was the fact that it was very simple. The message was very simple. We're facing an emergency and we have to do everything we can in response to that. And I think the fact that the story and like the feelings that we were communicating out there to the public, the fact that they were so simple and so understandable made a lot of people relate to this feeling, to this anxiety, to this fear, and really made people feel that they are invited into this movement, into the struggle. So I think that was one of the most crucial points. I think what I love about the youth climate movement is that it was crazy. It was fun. And I think I sometimes talk with, experts in the field and energy and like transport and economics, And what I often encounter is that they know so much and they focus so much on the detail, on the technicalities, on the professionalism within their work. But to be honest, in response to this apocalypse that we're living through, we should be crazy and we have to step out of the daily kind of business as usual of our lives. And I think youth climate movement showed that there is the space and there is a huge like importance in doing that. I myself also learned that we need to look to other communities, especially communities on the front lines of these crises and other social justice crises and battles, because very often they are the most crucial source of wisdom and inspiration and direction towards the things we do. So yeah, I would say simplicity of the movement, simplicity, like simple story that many people can connect with, fun, and like just the pure joy and craziness of the organizing itself, and then having the right priorities and the right people in mind as we're doing all of this action.
I want to double click on the third point that you said about the connection with communities. What were the examples for you or for the people from the movement that you were part of?
For me, I remember the first experiences of mine came from the fact that Fridays for Future was a global network of people. And as we were especially organizing the strikes, the global strikes together, we would often have, Zoom calls with people from like literally around the world where we would discuss what should be the narrative for the global strike. And I will never forget when my friend, who is a climate justice activist from Philippines, Mitzi, she would often say that like for Europeans, the climate crisis is often like an abstract crisis that is coming up, while for them, for people in Philippines, in Asia, in the global South, climate crisis is a reality they've been living through their whole lives with. And when you hear that on a random Zoom call with a friend of yours, from a friend of yours, these were the kinds of things that shook me like to the absolute core and made me realize that, okay, like we gotta get our work like done, really build those relationships with people who are at the core of this crisis. And we need to speed up, because this is not some fantasy about the future, but like we're actually talking about a huge systemic mistake, injustice that was being done for generations. This approach and this mindset was also super important for me in the regional context when the Russian invasion broke out in Ukraine. And I remember one of my friends from Ukraine told me at that point that, Domi, how are we supposed to like do the climate work and tell everyone that we need to care about the future if the bombs are falling on our houses and on our cities?
Yeah.
And that was another moment where it hit me that and I think that was like the final kind of moment I needed to realize that this work is about literally protecting people's lives, protecting lives that are being lost like every minute as we're speaking. And in that way, I think it also broke my like childhood or teenage like illusions that I've had about what this activism will be about.
How does it feels to carry that big of a burden?
It really is a journey for each person. And I once heard this story from a friend of mine that there are different stages of becoming aware of the climate crisis. It's once you hear the information. Second, you get so anxious and so fearful. Third, you jump into action and you want to solve it as fast as you can and as much as you can. And then you're faced with the realization that the problem is much bigger than you thought, but like you can do very little about it. And then you fall into despair. And if you take care of yourself, you can then transition into, approaching it as it is a marathon and not a sprint. And I definitely had this cycle happen to me.
Wow.
It also was connected to the national politics in Poland and to our fight to like abolish the right-wing government that we've had and fight for something new. And I've had this moment where, after a few years of this really intense work for social justice, for climate, I felt like I hit a wall. And I felt like I poured so much from myself, and I still don't see the changes and the transformation that is necessary. And I entered a pretty dark time, and it lasted for to be honest, a year at least, like consciously, when I actually like acknowledge that I feel really bad and I should reach out for help. And it happened. And looking back, I think it was absolutely like unavoidable. It was very necessary, but it was also really important to me that, there came a moment where I realized, and I also, my friends like suggested to me that I need to reach out for professional help, psychological help especially. And that really put me on tracks where I think I can do this work on a daily basis and not break down every single day. But it also, I think it's pushed me to accept that we will not save everything. And that's, I think for me, that was like a really a big thing, because I remember when I first heard of and got to know about the climate, like when I was like, what, like 12 or 13, I remember like thinking, oh my God, like I'll just have to like put like the hardest work that I can, and like we'll do everything we can, and we'll change it. We will change it. We will stop it. We will stop it. We will solve it, and it will be fine. And I think right now, given that, all of this political and economic decisions have been already made and some processes are just already on the track, like I know that I will not save everything and I will not prevent everything, like all of the destruction from happening. But everything that I will be able to do within my limits will be like invaluable. Everything we will manage to protect, to save, every injustice that we will be able to stop, that will mean the world. And that's
Wow.
where I am right now, I guess.
Wow. Wow. That is really, and in a way, like, what an interesting segue into the second part of this conversation, because in a way you were describing the process of healing, and kind of like what it means to heal in kind of like I'm a physician by training, so from a medical perspective, healing sometimes is referred to getting to the state as it was before, which is never true when it comes to real healing. It's always like a new state, like something has to be lost, something has to be recovered, some scars will stay there, but wounds will heal. And it's a really interesting kind of like parallel to what you're describing, is acknowledgement of this fact that not everything will be saved, and yet it's worth fighting for. So what can you say to clinicians? How can they be better allies to youth movements?
Well, first of all, I think we should talk more, honestly, because like you're probably like the first or maybe the second representative of the health community that I'm speaking with. And obviously, like I've had encounters with like health professionals in Poland, but it was never connected with the climate. Talking and staying in touch and exchanging knowledge is super important, because we have completely different approaches. We reach out to different people, but actually there's so much to learn from each other. And then I think there are ways and there are things that we could take from the health community. Definitely, this approach of care and this approach of like ensuring our basic needs and our basic like functionalities are fine. This is something that I think health professionals can teach us about a lot, and we would definitely appreciate more knowledge and more experience from that front. While at the same time, I think health professionals can take a lot from us, especially on the storytelling level, because I think everybody has this image of this professional doctor saying stuff that like you have no clue about, like no idea what he means, but he seems super knowledgeable, so like you will like pretend that like yes, I support the guy. So I think health professionals have a very strong like status in the public, but very often they don't do enough in making the public aware of how we can take care of each other and how we can improve the health system and the climate system. I would really love for any kind of experts out there to just be more human, I guess, their work and the way they also interact with others, because like by a paradox, they will be able to be so much more effective and their work will be so much more appreciated if they really speak like a normal citizen. Like if these people understand what you're talking about, then they will be, first of all, much less anxious about what's going on in the world, and second, they will be much better equipped with like the ways to save themselves and to protect themselves. So I think like maybe getting some inspiration from the youth movement, which is, I mean, very communicative and quite good in storytelling. I think it might be something worth discovering.
Yeah, I love that. Like you're naming this challenge. Like on one side, people do trust health professionals. Like nurses, for example, are the most trusted profession for years, for decades. Like people trust their nurses. But what you're saying is like that's not enough. If we couple that with plain simple language and stories, you can then kind of like achieve much more. And together we can achieve much more because that will create an amazing opportunity. I'm going to take us to the hope. Last time we talked, you said that you had a discovery on your own about that movement has to be about the vision as much as it is about current reality.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is that vision?
Well, you might be surprised, but like my vision is very simple. It's very basic. Like, it's very chill. In my perfect world, we spend a lot of time together. We have a lot of time to have fun, to share updates on our life, to cook together, to eat together, to just enjoy life. Everyone has access to a decent job, is paid well. We don't choke on the air that we breathe. We protect the nature around us, and we live in towns and cities that are made for people, not for cars or housing developers and landlords. We are able to like manage our energy system locally with our communities, and we're able to source the energy in a clean way and govern it ourselves, and rather than giving all of this power and all of these decisions to some dictators or like fossil fuel barons out there. And in this world, I guess, like, we still protest and we still fight, because I'm not naive to think that all the struggles will be over one day. But I think we will live in a time where people will have the basics covered. And so I really think that in this world, it's just going to be safe, peaceful, and joyful. And I just want to be able to sit on grass, eat strawberries, and hang out with my friends. Like, I gotta be frank, like that is my ambition. I used to be much more ambitious. I think right now it's about the basics, and it's about like what I treasure the most at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's basics. I think it's much more than that. And what a beautiful way to inspire us, and what a world that is worth fighting for. Like, honestly, like, we think, as you were saying at the beginning, the message is really simple.
Mm-hmm.
And what we need is also relatively simple. And then there's stuff in between that prevent us from getting there.
Yeah.
Domi, thank you so much. Honestly, I will cherish and hold this conversation in my heart and my mind.
Invited, you're feel invited to my future reality, and also to everyone who's listening, you also get an invite. So thank you so much, Pedja, for also for doing this and for paving the way for conversations like that, because I genuinely don't think that there is, as there I don't think there is enough of people like you. So thank you for this work.
That's it for this episode of Healthy Climate America. We hope you'll take what you learned and share it with colleagues and friends. Our work also wouldn't be possible without our members and donors. If you enjoyed listening, please go to ms2ch.org and click on Become a Member to join our community. Healthy Climate America is produced by Savannah Martinsik. Our podcast consultant is Julie Hantman. Our podcast intern is Isaias Segi. Our music was composed by James Harp.